Yo, what's good, gamers? It's Goldie back with another review. Right here, I have the Pulsar LGG Lethal Gaming Gear Hyperion pad. This is one that I've been pretty excited to try. It is a pretty nice pad so far. Actually, really nice. I'm enjoying it a lot so far. So essentially, let's just jump right into it. This is more of a I wouldn't call it control, even though it's kind of like been talked about as that. It's more of a balance control pad. It has a fair bit of speed to it, as you can tell, even though I am using pretty fast skates on it. Essentially, going into the surface, this is a pad that does have medium static friction, but it is still kind of low actually. It doesn't feel anywhere near slippery or speed pad level of static friction. You do feel pretty locked in. And it does require a little bit more force to move your mouse when it's in place compared to some other pads that are in the same category. The stopping power is pretty good, but I would say it's not quite a control pad. It's definitely the surface feels very smooth, but not extremely smooth. It's more of like a very, very lightly textured pad. It's very, very similar to the Artisan Zero or the Saturn Pro from Lethal Gaming Gear. And I would say it's a little smoother than a Zero. It's more on par with the Saturn in terms of texture and feel. So it's actually fairly smooth. Um, and essentially, this is just a collab between Pulsar and LGG. And so far, I'm really enjoying it. And I would say this is actually one of my favorite pads in this category at the moment. I would rate this pad fairly high. The friction, like I said, is very balanced if you're looking for something like that, but leaning on the side of control with a fair bit of stopping power. I will say it's going to be probably fairly skate dependent when it comes to how fast your experience is on this pad. With Silver Fox skates, it's actually pretty quick. Nowhere near balanced speed, but it's definitely balanced control. Definitely not control. The XY difference is definitely there though, like on a lot of cloth pads. As you can see, the Y is significantly slower than I don't know about significantly, but it's noticeably slower than the X. So I would say if you're looking for something that's like more balanced in that regard, I would go for like an Artisan Key 83. The base is really good. It's a Poron Slimflex base. I believe that's just Poron. Mine doesn't really move at all whatsoever. So I would say the base is pretty damn good. I have the soft variant with me. The soft feels pretty damn soft, honestly, so I would go soft or mid, firm, baseness. But the X Soft, yeah, is probably too soft. There's quite a bit of plushiness to this pad. It's very comfortable to use because the stitching it's not only soft, but the stitching is like pretty low, even to the surface. If anything, the surface is raised a little bit above the stitching. So it's very comfortable to use if you have a chair arm desk issue where you don't like feeling the pad on your forearm like me. I'd say it's fairly comfortable to use. This is the, I believe, slate color of the pad. It looks pretty awesome. The cool like neon green logo. It doesn't look quite neon green on my camera right now because of the sunlight. It looks almost white. But yeah, the stitching, base, and surface are just awesome. I'm really enjoying this pad right now. It's probably, like I said, one of my favorite in the category. When comparing it to a pad like the Artisan Zero or the Lethal Gaming Gear Saturn Pro, I would say I prefer this because it's a little bit more open and balanced compared to those pads, even though the Zero, I would say, is it's kind of leaning on that side. It doesn't feel like it gets quite as muddy as something like a Saturn Pro does over time. Feels pretty good and resistant to moisture and dust and hair compared to something like the Zero or Saturn. I would say this thing has stayed in pretty good condition, even though I've had it for pretty short amount of time. So I can't really say the long term use case is going to be quite there with what I'm saying. But if I had to rate the pads when it comes to the Saturn and the Zero, I would say I like this pad more than the Saturn Pro. And I'd say I'd like it pretty much equally as the Zero. Maybe would even rate it a little higher than the Artisan Zero just because it doesn't quite have, it has that little bit of fuzzy mild texturing like I was saying earlier, It's not quite as bumpy feeling as the Zero. Like, yeah, the Zero is kind of smooth, but it's got that slight bumpy fuzziness to it. I'd say this has a little bit less of that, and it's even a little bit more open when it comes to dynamic friction, and maybe a little lower when it comes to static friction. So that's probably why I would put it just a little above the Zero if I were to rank the comparisons of those pads. Um, Kind of moving into what I do like and what I don't like. I kind of already obviously covered what I do like about the pad. I think this is a phenomenal balance control pad. Um, what I don't like, I wouldn't say there's actually very much. So far. This has been a pretty like AS tier pad for me. I think they did a phenomenal job in pretty much every regard to this pad. It looks clean, it feels and performs very clean, and I think it's a really good option at this price point. I think it's only about $30 to $40, so it's like cheaper, much cheaper than a Saturn Pro or an Artisan Zero. And I think you're gonna have a good time in pretty much any game. Like attack shooters will work fine because of the stopping power. There's little bit less of static friction than like pads like the Saturn Pros. So like your micro adjustments might need to get a little cleaner if you're going to be playing attack shooter. But if you're going to be moving into heavier tracking games like Call of Duty or Apex or Overwatch, I think that you don't feel like you're fighting the friction quite as much as the other two pads. That this is kind of, I don't know if I should say modeled after, but in the same very like close category of comparison. So essentially, I think that if you're looking for something that's a little more open than those two pads, that this is probably like absolutely one of your best options. I think the Tang Dao from ESP Tiger is also really close to this, but I would say I would rate this a little bit higher than all of those pads, and it's definitely probably my favorite in the category. So everything is there for me when it comes to surface, base, stitching, texture, value, balance between jumping between games if you're someone that doesn't really like to switch pads. I think it's all there, and I absolutely recommend this pad to people. I think I've been performing great on this thing, and I feel like it's just really good value. So I would highly recommend this pad. I would rate it like a 9 out of 10. And essentially, that's going to wrap it up, but I hope you enjoyed it. I covered everything, and I really hope you look into getting this pad because I highly recommend it if you're looking for something that's in this category. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe.